The morning sun rose over New Haven like it had for the past 70 years. The sky was painted orange and purple, colors that still amazed people who had been born on Earth. Captain Lee Minho stood at the window of the orbital defense station, looking down at the planet below. He could see the farmlands spreading out like a green blanket, dotted with small towns and cities. 2.3 million people called this place home. Most of them had never seen Earth. This was their world. Minho sipped his coffee and checked the morning reports. Everything was normal. 3 cargo ships had arrived during the night, bringing supplies from other colonies. 2 mining vessels were heading out to the asteroid belt. The defense systems showed no threats. It was a typical boring day. That was exactly how Minho liked it. Down on the planet, Governor Park Ji-won was already in her office. She had been awake since 5 in the morning, reviewing budget reports. The colony needed a new water treatment facility. The schools were asking for more funding. The farmers wanted subsidies for the new growing season. Normal problems. Good problems. She smiled as she worked. Her daughter would graduate from university next month. Her son was playing in a youth soccer tournament this weekend. Life was good. In the medical center, Dr. Kim Hyen was examining a young patient. The boy had a broken arm from falling off his bicycle. Simple medicine, the kind Hyen preferred. He had spent years on Earth working in trauma centers, seeing terrible things. Coming to New Haven had been a gift. Here the worst injuries were broken bones and the occasional farming accident. He bandaged the boy's arm and sent him home with his worried mother. Lieutenant Choi Yuna sat at her communications console on the orbital station. She was young, only 29, but she was good at her job. She monitored all the signals coming in and out of the system. Most of it was routine traffic. Ship manifests, weather reports, messages between families on different worlds. She liked listening to the chatter. It reminded her that she was protecting real people with real lives. Teacher Kwon Dae-ho was starting his day at Central School. He taught history to teenagers, which meant he spent a lot of time trying to keep them interested in events that happened centuries ago. Today's lesson was about the early colony ships, the brave people who had left Earth to find new homes among the stars. His own children attended this school. He could see his youngest daughter in the hallway, laughing with her friends. He waved at her and she waved back before running to her next class. The day proceeded as expected. Until it didn't. At 10:30 in the morning, Yuna received a coded transmission. It was flagged as Priority 1, which was unusual. Priority 1 messages were supposed to be for emergencies only. She decoded it quickly and felt her stomach drop. The message was from Earth Intelligence and it was marked urgent. She called Captain Minho immediately. He came to her station and read the message over her shoulder. His face grew serious. The message was a warning. Earth Intelligence had discovered that the Vraxian Empire was eliminating human colonies. Not through war or economics, but through something much worse. They were targeting children. Minho read it twice to make sure he understood. According to the report, the Vraxians had been demanding genetic samples from human children across their empire. Colonies that refused were being punished. Some had simply disappeared. No distress calls. No survivors. Just empty worlds. Get Governor Park on the line, Minho said quietly. And Dr. Kim. They need to see this. An hour later, they were all gathered in a secure conference room. The message played on the screen. Governor Park read it 3 times. Her face was pale. This has to be wrong, she said. The Vraxians have been our neighbors for decades. They've never shown any hostility. Dr. Kim was silent. He was thinking about something. Finally, he spoke. 3 months ago, a Vraxian medical team came to the colony. They said they were building a database of genetic information for all species in the Empire. They wanted samples from our children. Blood tests, tissue samples. They said it was for medical research. Everyone looked at him. What did you do? Minho asked. I gave them what they asked for, Hyen said slowly. It seemed harmless. They were very polite, very scientific. They tested about 50,000 children. He paused. They were particularly interested in the younger ones. Under 12 years old, the room was silent. Governor Park felt sick. Why would they want genetic samples from children? Minho pulled up another file on the screen. I did some research after getting this warning. I found reports from other colonies. The Vraxians have been asking the same questions everywhere, always about children, always focusing on their genetic makeup. He looked at them seriously. I think they're looking for something specific. Or maybe they're afraid of something. Yuna spoke up. Humans mature differently than most species. Our children learn fast. They adapt. By the time a human child reaches adulthood, they're capable of complex problem-solving, creative thinking, tactical planning. Most alien species don't develop those abilities until much later in life. You think they see our children as a threat? Governor Park said. It wasn't a question. I think they see our children as the future, Minho replied. And they want to control that future. Or eliminate it, Governor Park stood up. She wanted to dismiss this as paranoia. She wanted to believe that their peaceful existence would continue. But she had been a leader long enough to know when something felt wrong. And this felt very wrong. What do we do? She asked. Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Yuna ran back to her console. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Captain, she called out. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple contacts. A fleet is entering the system. Minho joined her at the console. He looked at the readings and felt his blood turn cold. 37 ships, all of them Vraxian military vessels, battlecruisers, destroyers, and one massive dreadnought that was twice the size of anything the colony had. That's not a diplomatic mission, he said quietly. Governor Park stood beside him, looking at the screen. She thought about her children. She thought about all the children on New Haven. 800,000 young people who had done nothing wrong except exist. Get me a channel to that fleet, she ordered. Now, the communications officer tried. After several minutes, he shook his head. They're not responding, Governor. They're just coming. Dr. Kim stood at the window looking down at the planet. Somewhere down there, in schools and playgrounds and homes, children were laughing and playing. They had no idea what was heading toward them. He felt a terrible weight settle on his chest. How long until they reach orbit? Governor Park asked. Yuna checked her console. At their current speed, 6 hours. 6 hours. Governor Park thought about everything they needed to do. Evacuate the children. Prepare defenses. Call for help. But even as she thought these things, she knew the truth. They had 3 small transport ships and a handful of defensive weapons. Against a Vraxian battle fleet, they might as well throw rocks. Captain Minho was already organizing his people. He called down to the planet, ordering the militia to prepare. It wasn't much. New Haven had never needed a real military. They had farmers and teachers and shopkeepers who knew how to use basic weapons. Against trained Vraxian soldiers, they would be helpless. Teacher Quan received the emergency alert on his phone. He read it once, then looked around his classroom. 25 students stared back at him, waiting for him to continue the lesson. They were so young, so innocent. He thought about his own 3 children, scattered across the school. He made a decision. Class dismissed, he said quietly. Go home to your families. Right now. All across New Haven, people were receiving the same alert. Parents rushed to schools. Families gathered in homes. The emergency broadcast system activated, telling everyone to stay calm and await instructions. But there was no calm. There was only fear. Governor Park stood in the command center watching the Vraxian fleet draw closer. She had sent messages to Earth, to nearby colonies, to anyone who might help. So far, there had been no response. New Haven was alone. What do they want? She whispered. Minho stood beside her. He had served in the military for 25 years. He had seen combat. He had seen death. But he had never felt as helpless as he did right now. I think we're about to find out, he said. The Vraxian fleet settled into orbit around New Haven like vultures circling prey. Captain Minho watched from the defense station as the massive ships positioned themselves over major population centers. It was a formation designed to intimidate, and it was working. Every ship had its weapons pointed down at the planet. The message was clear. Resistance would be met with destruction. Admiral Voron's face appeared on every screen across the colony. He was tall and thin, like most Vraxians, with pale blue skin and dark eyes that showed no emotion. He wore the crimson uniform of the Vraxian military, decorated with medals that proved his importance. When he spoke, his voice was cold and formal. People of New Haven, he began, the Vraxian Empire has identified a threat to galactic stability. Recent studies have shown that human offspring carry genetic markers that pose a danger to peaceful coexistence among species. For the safety of all, we must take action. Governor Park listened from the command center, her hands gripping the edge of her desk so hard her knuckles turned white. She knew what was coming. Somehow she knew. All human children under the age of 18 must be surrendered to Vraxian custody within 48 hours. Varen continued. They will undergo mandatory genetic rehabilitation to remove dangerous tendencies. This is not negotiable. Compliance will be rewarded. Resistance will be met with severe consequences. The transmission ended. For a moment, there was complete silence in the command center. Then everyone started talking at once. Yuna was trying to get clarification. Minho was checking defensive positions. Other officers were pulling up evacuation plans. But Governor Park just sat there staring at the blank screen. Genetic rehabilitation, she said quietly. They're going to kill them. They're going to kill all the children. Dr. Kim had been contacted immediately after the broadcast. He arrived at the command center 20 minutes later, bringing files he had been researching. His hands shook as he laid them out on the table. I made some calls, he said. Contacted medical officers at other colonies. Some of them responded. He pulled up a star map on the screen. Red dots marked 17 different human colonies, all within Vraxian space. These colonies all received the same demand over the past 5 years. All of them were told to surrender their children for genetic rehabilitation. What happened to them? Governor Park asked, though she already knew the answer. Jan's voice was barely a whisper. 16 of them complied. They handed over their children. Those children were never seen again. The 17th colony refused. He highlighted a world called Darwin's Hope. 3 months after they refused, the entire colony was destroyed. 2 million people. No survivors. The Vraxians claimed it was a natural disaster, but satellite imagery shows orbital bombardment. Minho felt rage building in his chest. He had served beside Vraxian soldiers in peacekeeping missions. He had thought them honorable, if cold. This was something else entirely. This was evil. Why? He demanded. Why do they want our children? Lieutenant Choi had been digging through intelligence files. She found her answer in a classified Vraxian military assessment. It's right here, she said, reading from the screen. Human children demonstrate unprecedented neuroplasticity and adaptive learning capabilities. By age 18, the average human has cognitive flexibility that exceeds most species at twice that age. The report concludes that if human populations are allowed to grow unchecked, they will inevitably dominate in fields of innovation, strategy, and problem-solving. They're afraid, Governor Park said. They're afraid of what our children might become. So they kill them while they're young, Minho finished. Before they can become a threat. The command center descended into chaos as everyone tried to come up with solutions. Could they evacuate? They had 3 transport ships, each capable of carrying maybe 16,000 people. That was 48,000 people out of 2.3 million. And the Vraxian blockade would never let them through anyway. Could they fight? Minho had run the simulations a dozen times. The orbital defense station had enough firepower to maybe damage 2 or 3 Vraxian ships before being destroyed. The ground forces consisted of poorly trained militia with basic weapons. Against the Vraxian fleet, they would last hours at best. Could they negotiate? Governor Park had been trying for 6 hours. Every transmission to Admiral Voren went unanswered. Every plea to other colonies was met with silence. Every request to Earth for help was ignored. That last part hurt the most. Lieutenant Choi had finally gotten through to someone at Earth's diplomatic corps. A tired-looking official appeared on screen and listened to their situation. Then he sighed. New Haven is in Vraxian territory, he said flatly. Earth cannot interfere in Vraxian internal affairs. We have trade agreements to maintain. They're going to murder 800,000 children, Yuna said, her voice shaking with anger. The official looked uncomfortable. That's unfortunate, but Earth's position is clear. We cannot risk war with the Vraxian Empire over one colony. The transmission cut off. Yuna stared at the blank screen in disbelief. They're abandoning us. They abandoned us months ago, Minho said bitterly. They knew this was happening. They knew the Vraxians were targeting children. And they did nothing. Governor Park made a decision. She stood up and addressed everyone in the command center. Send a message to every parent on New Haven. Tell them the truth. All of it, what the Vraxians want. What happened to other colonies. What Earth said, her voice hardened, and tell them that I will not surrender a single child to these monsters. Not one. The message went out within the hour. Across New Haven, parents read the terrible news. Some panicked. Some cried. But most got angry. Very angry. Teacher Quan gathered his 3 children and his wife in their living room. He explained what was happening, speaking calmly even though his heart was breaking. His oldest son, 16, looked determined. "We fight," he said simply. "With what?" Quan asked. "We're teachers and farmers. They're a military fleet." "Then we hide," his daughter suggested. She was 14 and smart. "There must be places they can't find us." Dr. Kim was already thinking along the same lines. He pulled up geological surveys of New Haven. The planet had extensive cave systems, some of them very deep, and the colony had equipment designed for underground mining. Over the next 24 hours, working frantically, Hyun and a team of volunteers began preparing secret shelters. They focused on the deepest caves, miles underground. They brought in supplies, medical equipment, and most importantly, suspended animation pods. The pods had been designed for long space journeys, but they could work here too. If they could hide enough children in deep enough locations, maybe some would survive. But there was a problem. They had only 200 pods. 800,000 children, and they could save 200. Hyun felt physically ill as he realized the math. Meanwhile, other people were preparing to fight. Minho organized every person with military training. It wasn't many, maybe 3,000 total. They had hunting rifles, mining explosives, and determination. Against Vraxian battle armor and plasma weapons, it would be like fighting with sticks and stones. Quan joined the resistance. So did thousands of other parents. They knew they would probably die, but they couldn't just hand over their children. They couldn't live with that. Governor Park spent the remaining time trying one last option. She sent a direct transmission to Admiral Vorin. This time he answered. His face appeared on screen, emotionless as ever. "Admiral," she said carefully, "please reconsider. These are innocent children. They've done nothing wrong. They exist," Vorin replied. "That is enough." The decision has been made at the highest levels of the Vraxian Empire. Human children represent a genetic threat that must be neutralized. "What if we leave?" Park asked desperately. "What if we take our children and abandon this world? We'll go somewhere outside your territory." "Unacceptable," Vorin said. "The genetic threat remains regardless of location. The children must be surrendered." Park felt her last hope die. "Then you're going to have to come down here and take them." Vorin's expression didn't change. "As you wish. When the 48-hour deadline expires, my forces will begin landing operations. Resistance will be met with lethal force. You have been warned." The transmission ended. In the final hours before the deadline, New Haven became a world of frantic activity. Parents hid their children in basements, in caves, in secret rooms. Others armed themselves, preparing to fight. The 3 transport ships were loaded with children, a desperate attempt to run the blockade. Maybe one would get through. Maybe Dr. Kim personally selected 200 children to go into the deep shelter. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. How do you choose? He tried to pick the youngest, the ones who hadn't lived yet, but every choice meant leaving others behind. By the time he finished, he was crying. Teacher Quan stood with his family in their home. The deadline was 1 hour away. His children looked scared but brave. His wife held them close. "Whatever happens," Quan told them, "I'm proud of you. All of you." Governor Park made one final transmission to all of New Haven. "To my people," she began. "In 1 hour, the Vraxians will come for our children. Some of you will fight. Some will hide. Some will try to run. Whatever you choose, know that you are right to resist." The first strike hit the orbital defense station at exactly midnight. Captain Minho had 30 seconds of warning before the plasma torpedo struck. He used those seconds to give one final order. "All crew evacuate now." The station shook violently as the shields failed. Minho ran through the corridors, helping his people reach the escape pods. Lieutenant Choi was beside him, pulling injured officers toward safety. The walls around them were melting from the heat. Atmosphere was venting into space through a dozen hull breaches. "Captain, we have to go," Yuna shouted over the alarms. Minho pushed the last crew member into an escape pod and climbed in after them. The pod launched just as a second torpedo struck the station. Through the small window, Minho watched the place he had called home for 7 years break apart. Metal twisted and exploded. The reactor went critical, creating a brief new sun in orbit. 40 people had been aboard that station. 32 had made it to the pods. The pods fell toward New Haven like shooting stars. Most landed safely, though 3 were shot down by Vraxian fighters during the descent. Minho's pod crashed in a field outside Central City. He climbed out, bruised and burned, and looked up at the sky. It was filled with fire. The Vraxian bombardment was surgical and brutal. They weren't trying to destroy the entire planet. They were targeting specific locations. Schools first. Every educational building on New Haven was hit within the first hour. The blasts were designed to penetrate deep underground, collapsing basements and bunkers where children might be hiding. Teacher Quan was in Central School when the bombs fell. He had stayed behind with a group of other teachers, preparing to defend the 200 students whose parents hadn't been able to get them home in time. They had barricaded the doors and armed themselves with whatever they could find. It didn't matter. The building shook once, a distant rumble. Then came a sound like thunder, growing louder. Quan looked up at the ceiling and saw cracks forming. "Everyone get down!" he screamed. The children dove under desks and tables. Quan threw himself over 3 students who were too scared to move. The bomb penetrated through 4 floors before detonating. The entire school collapsed in seconds. Quan felt the weight of the building crushing down. He tried to shield the children beneath him, but there was too much weight, too much debris. His last thought was of his own children. He hoped they had escaped. He hoped someone would survive to remember what happened here. The school became a grave for 317 people, teachers and children buried together. Across New Haven, the same scene repeated. Schools exploded. Residential areas were hit next. Any building that might house children. The Vraxian targeting was precise because Dr. Kim's genetic database had given them exactly what they needed. They knew where every child on New Haven lived, played, and learned. Eon watched the destruction from the medical center and felt sick. He had given them that information. He had thought he was helping. Instead, he had created a targeting map for genocide. His hands shook as emergency patients started arriving. Burns, trauma injuries, people pulled from collapsed buildings. Most were adults who had been trying to protect children. Most of the children hadn't survived. Governor Park was in the emergency command bunker beneath the Capitol building. Reports flooded in, each one worse than the last. Central School destroyed. Northern Academy hit. Riverside Elementary gone. The numbers climbed. 10,000 dead. 50,000. 100,000. They're hunting them, she said quietly. They're specifically targeting the children. A military aide brought news of the transport ships. All 3 had attempted to break through the Vraxian blockade. All 3 had been destroyed. 48,000 people had been aboard those ships. 90% of them were children. The aide's voice broke as he delivered the report. Park closed her eyes. She was the governor. She was supposed to protect these people. Instead, she had failed them completely. "Get me a weapon," she ordered. "If they're coming down here, I'm going to fight." The Vraxian ground forces landed on the second day. Thousands of soldiers in heavy armor, armed with weapons that could level buildings. They moved through the cities methodically, searching every structure. When they found children, they killed them immediately. When they found adults trying to protect children, they killed them too. The human resistance fought back with everything they had. Hunting rifles against plasma weapons, improvised explosives against armored vehicles. It was courage without hope, fury without victory. They died by the hundreds, but they made the Vraxians pay for every meter of ground. Captain Minho led a group of former military personnel in Central City. They had fortified an office building and were using it as a base to launch attacks on Vraxian patrols. It was working for a while. They destroyed 3 armored vehicles and killed maybe 50 Vraxian soldiers. Then the building was surrounded. A Vraxian commander used a loudspeaker to demand surrender. Minho's response was to shoot the commander. The Vraxians responded by bringing in heavy weapons. The building was hit by artillery until nothing remained but rubble. Minho and his people fought from the ruins until they were overwhelmed. Of the 60 people who had defended that building, none survived. Lieutenant Choi had made it to a resistance cell in the southern continent. She used her communication skills to coordinate attacks, passing information between different groups. It helped a little. But the Vraxians had air superiority, overwhelming numbers, and better technology. Every small victory was followed by crushing defeat. On the 3rd day, the Vraxians found one of the hidden shelters. It was in a cave system north of the capital, where 300 children were hiding with their families. The Vraxians sealed the entrance with explosives, then pumped poison gas into the caves. When they finally entered, everyone inside was dead. They found 7 more shelters over the next 2 days. Each time the result was the same. The Vraxians showed no mercy. Children as young as 3 years old killed without hesitation. Parents who begged for their lives were ignored. The orders were clear. Eliminate all human children and anyone who tried to protect them. Dr. Kim's secret shelter, the one with the 200 children in suspended animation, remained undiscovered. It was deeper than the others in a cave system that wasn't on any official maps. Hyun had told no one about it except the 3 people who had helped him prepare it. He had deleted all records. If he died without revealing the location, those children would die too, slowly starving in their sleep. But if he told anyone, the Vraxians might learn about it. He made a decision. He found Governor Park in the ruins of the capital and pulled her aside. In whispered words, he told her about the shelter. He gave her the coordinates, made her memorize them. If something happens to me, he said, those children need someone who knows where they are. Park memorized the numbers. How long can they survive in the pods? 5 years, maybe longer if the power hold, Hyun replied. They're in the deepest part of the cave system. The Vraxians would need specialized equipment to find them. Then we keep this secret, Park said, no matter what. Those 200 children are our future. They're all that's left. By the end of the 3rd day, the resistance was broken, not because people stopped fighting, but because there was no one left to fight. The Vraxian patrols moved through empty streets, finding only bodies. The orbital bombardment had stopped because there were no more targets worth hitting. Admiral Voren surveyed the results from orbit. His staff provided the final casualty reports. 800,000 human children eliminated, an additional 600,000 adults killed while trying to protect them. Total casualties, 1.4 million. Survivors, approximately 900,000, most of them too traumatized to resist further. Voren recorded his official report to the Vraxian High Command. The New Haven situation has been resolved. All human children under 18 have been neutralized. Remaining population is being secured. Recommend similar operations at other human colonies to prevent further genetic contamination. He transmitted the report and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The mission had been messy but successful. The human threat had been eliminated before it could develop. In a few generations, when these survivors died, New Haven would be empty. The Vraxian Empire would be safe. What Voren didn't understand was that he hadn't eliminated a threat. He had created one. In a field hospital, Dr. Kim worked on injured survivors. Every person he treated had lost someone. Children, siblings, parents. The grief was overwhelming, suffocating. But beneath the grief, he saw something else forming. Something cold and hard and dangerous. A woman who had lost her 2 sons looked at him with empty eyes. They'll pay for this, she whispered. I don't know how. I don't know when. But they will pay. Hyun said nothing. He was thinking the same thing. Lieutenant Choi had survived the fighting by sheer luck. She found Governor Park in the ruins of the command bunker. Both women were covered in dust and blood, exhausted beyond measure. They stood together looking at what remained of Central City. We need to start helping the survivors, Park said quietly. Get food, medical supplies, shelter. The Vraxians will allow humanitarian aid. We need to show them we're no longer a threat. Yuna looked at her. Are we still a threat? 6 months after the massacre, New Haven existed in a strange kind of peace. The Vraxian occupation forces maintained order. The survivors rebuilt what they could. On the surface, everything looked calm. But beneath that calm surface, something was stirring. Governor Park had become a different person. She still held her title, but only because the Vraxians found it useful to have a human administrator. She attended meetings with Vraxian officials, nodded politely at their demands, and signed papers authorizing new regulations. She played the part of a defeated leader managing a broken people. It was all an act. In secret, Park was the center of a growing resistance network. She held meetings in basements and caves and abandoned buildings that the Vraxian patrols never checked. Survivors came to these meetings with rage in their eyes and grief in their hearts. They wanted revenge. Park gave them something better, a plan. Captain Minho had survived his injuries, though his body bore the scars. He walked with a limp now, and his left arm didn't work quite right. But his mind was sharp as ever. He had been organizing the remaining military personnel, along with anyone who knew how to fight. They trained in secret, using makeshift weapons and captured Vraxian equipment. But Minho knew that fighting wasn't enough. The Vraxian fleet still orbited above them. Any open rebellion would result in orbital bombardment and total destruction. They needed something else, something the Vraxians wouldn't expect. Dr. Kim provided the answer. He had been studying captured Vraxian technology, taking apart their weapons and equipment piece by piece. What he found was fascinating. The Vraxians were technologically advanced, yes, but their systems were rigid. Everything was standardized, centralized, connected. They had built an empire on efficiency and control. Hyun saw that as a weakness waiting to be exploited. He worked with a small team of engineers and scientists, people who had once designed farming equipment and medical devices. Now they were learning to build weapons from mining lasers and explosives from fertilizer. The Vraxians never noticed. After all, these were just broken survivors trying to rebuild their farms. Nothing threatening about that. Lieutenant Choi had discovered something even more valuable. She had made contact with an underground network that connected multiple human colonies across Vraxian space. These were people who had survived similar massacres, or who lived in constant fear of being next. They communicated through hidden channels using codes that the Vraxians couldn't break. The network shared information. New Haven wasn't the only target. Over the past 6 years, the Vraxians had attacked 23 human colonies. Some had surrendered their children and been left in peace. Others had resisted and been destroyed. The total death count was in the millions. Most of it was children. Yuna compiled this information into a detailed report. Names, dates, locations. Evidence of systematic genocide. She showed it to Governor Park during one of their secret meetings. Park read the report in silence. Her hands trembled with barely controlled rage. "Does Earth know about this?" "Yes," Yuna replied quietly. "I found communications between Earth's government and the Vraxian Empire. They've known for years. They chose not to intervene. Why? Trade agreements, mining rights, technology exchanges." Yuna's voice was bitter. Earth's government decided that maintaining good relations with the Vraxian Empire was worth more than saving their own colonies. Park set down the report. "Then Earth has abandoned us. We're on our own." "Not exactly," Yuna said. She pulled up another file. "This network connects hundreds of thousands of humans across Vraxian space. People who are angry. People who want revenge. They're waiting for someone to lead them." The idea formed slowly over the next several months. They couldn't defeat the Vraxian Empire through military force, but they could send a message. They could show the galaxy that humanity would not accept genocide quietly. Captain Minho worked with his people to seize control of several key facilities. The main communications relay was their primary target. It was heavily guarded, but the Vraxian soldiers had grown complacent. They didn't see the humans as a threat anymore. Just victims who had accepted their fate. That was their mistake. The attack happened at midnight, 3 months after the planning began. Minho's people moved silently through the shadows, using tunnels they had secretly dug over weeks of careful work. They emerged inside the compound, disabled the guards, and seized control of the relay before the Vraxians even knew what was happening. Lieutenant Choi was waiting with her equipment. She connected to the relay and began broadcasting. The signal went out across every channel, translated into 847 different languages. It reached human colonies, Vraxian worlds, and every species in between. Governor Park stood in front of the camera. She looked tired and worn, but her eyes burned with purpose. She began to speak. "My name is Park Ji-won. I am the governor of New Haven Colony. 6 months ago, the Vraxian Empire murdered 800,000 children on my world. They did this because they feared what these children might become. They saw human children as a genetic threat to their supremacy." She paused, letting that sink in. This was not unique. Over the past 6 years, the Vraxian Empire has systematically massacred millions of human children across 23 colonies. They call it genetic rehabilitation. We call it what it is, genocide. Park held up the files that Yuna had compiled. "I have evidence. Names, dates, locations. Proof of what they have done. This information has been transmitted with this message. Anyone can verify it. Anyone can see the truth." Her voice hardened. "To the Vraxian Empire, we have one message: humanity is coming. Not our governments who abandoned us for trade agreements. Not our politicians who value profit over children. Us, the survivors. The witnesses. The parents who watched their children die." She leaned forward, speaking directly into the camera. We are not asking for mercy. We are not seeking justice through diplomacy. We are informing you of a fact. You have made an enemy that will never stop, never forgive, and never forget. You have one choice: flee. Leave every human world. Abandon every system you have taken from us. Run to the furthest edge of the galaxy. Park's expression was cold as ice. And when you think you are safe, run further. Because we are coming. And when we find you, you will learn what it means to threaten human children. You have 90 days. The transmission ended. For a moment, there was silence. Then alarms began blaring across the compound. Vraxian soldiers were responding to the unauthorized broadcast. Minho's people held them off long enough for Yuna to disconnect her equipment and wipe the logs. Then they scattered into the tunnels, disappearing before the Vraxians could organize a proper response. The message spread across the galaxy in hours. Human colonies erupted in fury as they learned the full extent of the massacres. Many had known about individual incidents, but seeing the complete picture was devastating. The Vraxian Empire had been committing genocide for years, and Earth's government had been complicit through silence. On Earth, riots broke out. Citizens demanded answers. How could their government allow this? How could they trade with a species that murdered children? The politicians tried to explain, tried to justify their decisions. No one was listening. Admiral Voran watched the broadcast from his flagship. He found it amusing in a way. These survivors actually thought they could threaten the Vraxian Empire. With what? Harsh words and empty promises? He gave interviews to galactic media, laughing at the amusing human bravado. They are broken people making desperate threats, he said confidently. The Vraxian Empire has nothing to fear from the survivors of New Haven. They have no fleet, no military, no support. This is the death cry of a defeated species. The galactic community mostly agreed. Sympathy for the humans was widespread. But no one thought they could actually challenge Vraxian power. The message from New Haven was seen as tragic but futile. Then, on day 7 of the 90-day countdown, something happened. 3 Vraxian warships were patrolling the New Haven system. Routine patrol, nothing special. They were communicating with the orbital command station, reporting their positions. Then, mid-transmission, all 3 ships simply stopped responding. The command station tried to raise them. No answer. They sent other ships to investigate. When they arrived at the last known positions, they found nothing. No debris, no energy signatures, no distress beacons. The ships had simply vanished. Admiral Voran reviewed the reports personally. 3 warships don't just disappear. There's always evidence, always something. But in this case, there was nothing. It was as if the ships had been erased from existence. He ordered increased patrols and better surveillance. 2 weeks later, it happened again. A supply convoy of 5 ships disappeared between New Haven and the nearest Vraxian military base. One moment they were there, transmitting routine updates. The next moment, silence. This time, Voran sent an entire battle group to investigate. They found one piece of debris, a single section of hull plating. On it, someone had scratched a message in English. Day 19. 71 days remaining. The galactic media, which had been mocking the New Haven survivors, suddenly went quiet. Something was happening. Something the Vraxians hadn't expected. On New Haven, Governor Park received reports from the Resistance Network. The ships had been destroyed by human forces. Day 90 began like any other day in the Vraxian Empire. Ships moved between worlds. Commerce flowed. Military patrols maintained order. Admiral Voran sat in his command chair aboard the flagship, reviewing defensive positions. He had deployed additional forces around New Haven and other human colonies. Whatever the humans were planning, he was ready. He wasn't ready. At exactly noon Standard Galactic Time, Dr. Kim activated his creation. It was elegant in its simplicity, a quantum virus designed to spread through the Vraxian network like wildfire. It had taken 6 months to build, required technology that shouldn't exist, and was created by people who were supposed to be defeated and broken. The virus entered the network through a captured Vraxian patrol ship. The ship jumped to a relay station as planned. The moment it connected to the network, the virus began spreading. It moved at the speed of light through quantum channels, jumping from node to node, from ship to station to planetary networks. In 43 minutes, the entire Vraxian Empire went dark. Admiral Voran was reviewing tactical displays when his screen suddenly went blank. Then the lights failed. Then the backup systems. All around him, officers were shouting reports. Navigation offline. Communications dead. Life support switching to emergency power. Weapon systems unresponsive. What happened? Voren demanded. No one could answer. Every system on the ship had failed simultaneously. They were dead in space, floating blind and helpless. Voren looked out the window and saw other ships in his fleet, all dark, all drifting. Across the entire Vraxian Empire, 200 worlds and 10,000 ships were experiencing the same thing. The quantum network that had been their greatest strength was now their fatal weakness, and it was completely destroyed. On New Haven, Governor Park received confirmation that the virus had worked. She allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. Then she got to work. "Send the signal," she ordered. "All forces, begin operations." The signal went out across the human resistance network. On dozens of worlds, in hundreds of locations, humans who had been preparing in secret launched simultaneous attacks. They struck at military bases, communication centers, and any Vraxian facility that might pose a threat. Without their network, the Vraxians couldn't coordinate a response. Each garrison fought alone, confused and overwhelmed. But the real war was happening in space. Earth's new military government had spent months building a fleet. They had raided shipyards, seized commercial vessels, and converted anything that could fly into a warship. It wasn't a pretty fleet, but it was large and it was angry. Captain Minho was aboard one of these ships. He had left New Haven 2 weeks earlier to join the fleet. Now he stood on the bridge of a converted mining vessel, armed with improvised weapons and crewed by survivors from 3 different massacres. None of them were professional soldiers. All of them had lost children. Target confirmed, the sensor officer reported. Vraxian military station dead in space, no defensive response. Minho gave the order. Fire. The mining lasers, designed to cut through asteroids, tore through the station's hull like paper. There was no mercy. No quarter given. The Vraxians had murdered children. They would receive exactly the justice they deserved. Across Vraxian space, the same scene repeated. Human fleets, organized from the survivors of massacred colonies, moved through enemy territory like death itself. They targeted military assets exclusively. Warships, bases, weapon platforms. They destroyed them all. But they didn't conquer. They didn't occupy. They just destroyed and moved on. Admiral Voren's flagship finally got emergency systems working after 6 hours. They managed to restore basic life support and short-range communications. Voren tried to contact other ships, other bases, the Vraxian homeworld. Nothing. The network was completely gone. Then a human ship appeared. It was small, barely larger than a shuttle, but it broadcast a message directly to Voren's flagship. The voice was female, calm and cold. "Lieutenant Choi, Admiral Voren," she said. "This is Lieutenant Choi Yuna of New Haven. You may remember us. You killed 800,000 of our children 6 months ago. You called it necessary. You called it justice. Would you like to know what we call it?" Voren said nothing. He was watching his tactical display, what little of it worked. Human ships were appearing throughout the system. Dozens of them, all armed. "We call it genocide," Yuna continued. "And we promised you would pay. Did you think we were bluffing? Did you think we were too weak to fight back? You made a mistake, Admiral. You left survivors. And survivors remember. The human ships opened fire. Voren's flagship, already crippled, took multiple hits. The bridge filled with smoke and alarms. Voren tried to give orders, but there was no one to hear them. His crew was abandoning ship, fleeing in escape pods. He sat in his command chair as the ship died around him. He thought about his report from 6 months ago. The New Haven situation has been resolved. How wrong he had been. The final attack came from Minho's ship. The mining laser cut through the flagship's command deck in one clean strike. Admiral Voren, architect of the New Haven massacre, died without ever understanding how completely he had failed. The systematic destruction of Vraxian military power took 3 months. Human fleets moved from system to system, finding disabled ships and defenseless bases. They destroyed every military asset they could find. Some Vraxian vessels tried to fight with backup systems and manual controls, but they were no match for human determination. On Earth, the new government declared total war. Every resource, every factory, every person was dedicated to the conflict. Ships were built in weeks instead of years. Weapons were mass-produced. Millions of volunteers signed up to join the fleets. Every single one of them had the same motivation. Make sure this never happened again. Dr. Kim worked with Earth's scientists to ensure the Vraxian network could never be rebuilt. They sent follow-up viruses, destroyed key infrastructure, eliminated backup systems. The quantum network that had connected an empire was reduced to useless hardware. But something interesting happened as the war progressed. Other species started watching closely. They saw what humanity could do when motivated by grief and rage. They saw a species that had been dismissed as weak suddenly bring down an empire in months, and they started wondering, what if we're next? The answer came from Governor Park. She made a broadcast to the entire galaxy standing in the rebuilt ruins of New Haven's capital. To the galaxy, she began. You have watched humanity wage war against the Vraxian Empire. You have seen us destroy their military, cripple their infrastructure, and bring them to their knees. Some of you are wondering if humanity plans to continue this war of conquest. She paused, letting the tension build. The answer is no. We sought no conquest. We wanted no empire. We simply wanted justice for murdered children. The Vraxians killed millions of our young. We destroyed their ability to ever do it again. That is all. Park's expression softened slightly. To the Vraxian people living on your homeworlds, you are safe. We have no quarrel with civilians. We have no desire to rule you. You will be left alone to rebuild your civilization. But know this. If you ever threaten human children again, if any Vraxian military ever reforms, if you ever forget what happened here, we will return. And next time we will not be so merciful. She turned her attention to the rest of the galaxy, to every species that participated in the massacres, that turned a blind eye, that profited from our suffering. You have one chance. One opportunity to make this right. Help us find every missing child. Return every stolen person. Provide reparations to the survivors. Do this and we will forgive. Refuse and you will join the Vraxians in defeat. The message was clear. Humanity was not a victim anymore. They were something far more dangerous, a species that had lost everything and survived anyway. 3 years after the New Haven massacre, the galaxy had been transformed. The Vraxian Empire no longer existed. Their worlds were isolated, their people reduced to pre-spaceflight technology, not destroyed, but permanently contained. Other species that had participated in the massacres paid heavy reparations. Some fought back and lost. Most chose cooperation. The galaxy learned a simple lesson. Do not threaten human children. On New Haven, reconstruction was nearly complete. New buildings rose from the ruins. Farms were productive again. The population, supplemented by immigration from other colonies, had grown to 1.8 million. But everyone who lived there knew the history. Every street had a memorial. Every school taught what had happened, and in the deepest cave, carefully maintained and guarded, 200 children slept in suspended animation. Dr. Kim visited them regularly, checking the systems, ensuring they remained safe. They would sleep for 5 years total, as planned. When they woke, they would be the last living witnesses to the world before the massacre. Governor Park, now in her late 50s, stood at the memorial in Central Square. 800,000 names carved in black stone. She came here every morning, reading names at random, remembering. Her own daughter's name was there, and her son's. She traced their names with her fingers. We kept our promise. She whispered to the stone. We made them pay. We made sure it would never happen again. Captain Minho joined her, limping on his bad leg. He had retired from military service but remained on New Haven. This was home.